I still remember the way my father looked at me that day, cold, empty, like I was nothing more than a burden he'd been waiting to shake off. I was 19, and I had just been told I was sick. Not the kind of sick you shake off after a week, but the kind that changes everything. The doctor said I'd need treatment, expensive treatment. My mom cried quietly in the corner. My little sister just stared at her shoes. But my father, he didn't even blink. He looked straight at me and said the words that would burn into my memory forever. "You're too expensive to save." At first, I thought I misheard him. I laughed, nervously, waiting for him to say he was joking. But he didn't. He just stood up, patted my shoulder, and said, "We can't afford this. You'll have to figure something out." That was the moment my family, my blood, turned their backs on me. I begged. I cried. I promised I'd find a way to pay them back. But they didn't care. The next morning, my hospital bed was empty, and I was... No messages, no visits, no calls, just silence. That silence became my new life. The first few months were the hardest. I had no money, no place to stay, and no strength to even walk properly. But I was stubborn. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was survival instinct. I started doing odd jobs between treatments, cleaning apartments, serving in small cafes, even helping at a bookstore just for tips. Every time my body ached, I'd think of my father's words, "You're too expensive to save," and it would give me just enough fire to keep going. There were nights I slept behind the diner where I worked. The owner knew my story and left the back door open for me sometimes. I'd look up at the sky and whisper, "One day, they'll regret this. One day." It wasn't about money or revenge then. It was about survival. But deep down, I knew that if I ever got the chance, I'd make them face what they did. 5 years passed. I survived. Not just survived, I built something. I worked 3 jobs, took classes at night, and slowly I rebuilt my life. I became a nurse's assistant, then a full nurse. I helped others like me, abandoned, hopeless, alone, because I knew what it felt like. Every paycheck, I'd look at it and smile, thinking, I'm still here, and they'll have to live with that. Then, one ordinary Thursday afternoon, as I was getting ready for my night shift, I heard a knock on my door. A man in a black suit stood there, holding a leather briefcase. He smiled politely and said, "Miss Harper, my name is Mr. Ellis. I'm here on behalf of a medical research foundation. I believe you're the rightful recipient of a donation." I blinked, confused. A donation? From who? He opened his briefcase, placed the stack of papers on my table, and said something that nearly made my knees buckle. "You've been awarded a $63 million inheritance. The donor requested it goes specifically to you." I froze. Who would do that?" I whispered. He smiled faintly. The next few days were a blur. I barely slept, barely ate. $63 million. It didn't feel real. I kept rereading the note over and over again. The girl they left behind. Someone knew. Someone had seen what happened. Was it a stranger? A doctor? Someone from my past? Mr. Ellis explained that the donor had invested in a groundbreaking medical research project, one that my original diagnosis had helped inspire. The treatment they developed saved countless lives, including mine. My case apparently had changed everything. "The donor insisted your name be linked to the research," he said. "He said you deserved recognition for surviving what you went through." Recognition? I never asked for that. All I ever wanted was to be seen by the people who abandoned me. But fate, or maybe karma, had bigger plans. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in my new apartment, nothing fancy, just peaceful, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello, is this Lily?" The voice froze my blood. Mom. I hadn't heard her voice in 5 years. She sounded nervous, shaky, like someone walking on glass. She said they'd heard the news about me on the local paper. Apparently, the inheritance had made headlines. Local woman awarded $63 million from unknown donor. And suddenly, my family remembered I existed. Sweetheart, she said, her voice breaking, we made mistakes. We didn't know how to handle things back then. Your father, he's not the same man anymore. I almost laughed. Not the same man? The same man who called me a burden? We'd love to see you, just to talk, she said. Maybe have dinner, as a family. I should have hung up. I should have said no. But some part of me, that wounded, curious part, wanted to see them, to look them in the eye, to see what regret looks like. So I agreed. The restaurant was small but elegant, the kind of place my father would never have taken me before. He was already there when I arrived, wearing a forced smile. My mother looked older, tired. My sister, now in college, barely met my eyes. Lily, Dad said, standing up, you look incredible. I smiled politely. I survived, remember? The silence that followed was heavy. They tried small talk at first. How's work? Where do you live? How have you been? But every question felt like a test. Then finally my father leaned forward and said it. We heard about your success. That's amazing. Really amazing. We're proud of you. I raised an eyebrow. Proud? For what? For surviving what you left me to face alone? He flinched, but tried to keep smiling. We made mistakes, okay? We were scared. You didn't know what to do. You knew exactly what to do, I said quietly. You walked away. The table went silent again. My mom wiped a tear. My sister finally looked up. Dad lost his job after you left, she said. We were broke. We didn't know how to help. I sighed. You could have called, written, anything. But they didn't. Then came the real reason they'd invited me. Lily, Dad said slowly, we're in a bit of trouble financially. We were hoping maybe. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The irony was too perfect. So that's what this dinner's about? He looked embarrassed. It's not like that, sweetheart. We just... Stop calling me that. I interrupted. You don't get to. I stood up, heart pounding. You left me to die, remember? Now you want my help? They didn't say a word, just sat there, watching me walk away. And for the first time in years, I felt free. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of what they said, but because of how calm I felt. 5 years ago, I would have broken down in that restaurant, begging for their love. But not this time. This time, I walked away with power. Quiet, steady power. The kind they'd never understand. Still, I couldn't shake one question. What now? I had everything they once said I'd never have. Stability, recognition, wealth. But revenge? True revenge wasn't about money or anger. It was about balance, about making them face what they tried to bury. So I made a plan. Not to destroy them, but to expose them. To make them see the truth about themselves. A week later, I visited my old neighborhood. The same one they'd sold and left behind when things got too expensive. The houses looked smaller than I remembered. The street was quieter. Mrs. Riley, our former neighbor, saw me from her porch and nearly dropped her coffee mug. Lily Harper? Is that really you? She ran up and hugged me so tight it almost hurt. Oh, honey, we thought you were gone. What happened to you? When I told her the short version, her eyes filled with tears. Your family told everyone you moved away for school, she said softly. They never said anything about your illness. I just smiled. I know. Over the next few days, I did something my parents never expected. I quietly started donating. Not just to big charities, but to local ones. Small medical clinics, youth shelters, even the hospital that treated me when I had nothing. Each donation came with a simple message. From the girl they left behind. It didn't take long before the phrase started appearing in local news stories and social media posts. The girl they left behind donates millions to help abandoned patients. Anonymous benefactor funds free treatments for the uninsured. People were curious. The community was inspired. And my parents couldn't hide anymore. 3 weeks later, I received another call. This time from my sister, Mia. Her voice cracked through the phone. "Lily, people are talking. About you. About what you're doing." I said nothing. Just waited. "Dad's angry. He says you're trying to humiliate us." I almost laughed. "I'm not trying to humiliate anyone. I'm helping people. Something he never did." She hesitated. "He's scared, Lily. The bank's taking the house. Mom's sick, and we can't afford the bills." Part of me wanted to hang up right there. Another part, the same heart that used to ache for them, wanted to help. But then I remembered the hospital room. The words. The cold stare. "Mia," I said softly, "I know what it's like to have no one. So I'll help Mom. But not through him. Not one penny goes into his hands." She didn't argue. She just whispered, "Thank you," before hanging up. 2 months later, the town hosted a charity gala to honor major donors for local healthcare programs. I didn't plan to attend. I hated the attention. But Mr. Ellis, the lawyer who'd handled the inheritance, convinced me otherwise. "You don't have to speak," he said. "Just being there would mean something. Closure, maybe." So I went. I wore a simple black dress, nothing flashy. But when I walked into that hall, the murmurs started immediately. People whispered. Cameras flashed. And across the room, my father stood, jaw tight, holding a drink he didn't need. He looked smaller, thinner. When our eyes met, he froze. For the first time, I wasn't the weak one. The mayor stepped onto the stage and spoke warmly about the donations that had saved hundreds of lives. Then he called my name. "Please welcome the woman whose generosity and resilience inspired us all, Miss Lily Harper." Applause thundered. I walked to the stage slowly, feeling the weight of every step. I didn't prepare a speech, but somehow the words came. 5 years ago, I was left alone in a hospital bed with nothing but a diagnosis and fear. I thought my life was over. But sometimes, what feels like an ending is just a cruel beginning. I paused, scanning the audience, my father's face pale in the crowd. I survived, not because I was strong, but because I refused to believe my story was over. And now, I use what I have to make sure no one else gets left behind. People stood and clapped. Some cried. But my father, he couldn't even lift his head. After the event, he approached me outside, under the soft glow of the streetlights. His voice trembled. "Lily, I don't deserve to ask you this, but I need to say it." I folded my arms, waiting. I was wrong about everything. I was scared. I thought I was protecting the family, but I destroyed it instead. His eyes glistened. "Can you ever forgive me?" For years I dreamed of this moment, of him begging, apologizing, breaking down. But now that it was here, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt done. "Forgiveness isn't a gift I can give you," I said quietly. "It's something you have to earn, and not from me, from yourself." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "You sound just like your mother used to." I smiled faintly. Maybe she learned from me. And then, without another word, I turned and walked away. It's been a year since that night. I still run the foundation, now expanded across 3 states. We help young adults abandoned by their families, people fighting illness alone, anyone who needs a chance. My mom recovered, thanks to medical support I arranged anonymously. She never knew it came from me, and that's okay. She's safe. That's what matters. My father, he sold the last of his company shares and retired quietly. Sometimes I hear that he volunteers at the hospital where I once was treated. Maybe he's learning something about mercy after all. And me? I've stopped chasing revenge. Because revenge didn't heal me. Compassion did. Yes, they left me to die, but I lived. And that's the most powerful revenge of all. Sometimes life gives you villains to teach you how to be your own hero. And sometimes, being the one who survived is the loudest justice there is. Moral: true revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. The best justice is living better than they ever imagined you could. Dot.